general intention to talk about power, conspiracy, and rebellion. Whatever can be said about reality, what seems to be out there, is also true for consciousness, which seems to be in here. This is the very point where consciousness breaks down ordinarily, because then you're dealing with these kinds of apparent questions. That is, what humanity, including yourself, let us say, under ordinary conditions, perceives to be going on in life. Is that what's going on? The divisions man makes of things into good and bad, into national tribes. Is that in fact a legitimate division and description? And if so, do these divisions, such as nationalistic divisions, do they make you be conscious in a certain way? That is a Argentine conscious in a different way of reality than a Tibetan? And if you say yes, then you're left with such questions as this if you're going to pursue it any further. Is that because that there is an inherent difference between the kind of consciousness that would be native to a Tibetan and that which would be normal to an Argentine? Or, if there is a difference, if they describe reality in general and in different terms, is it because that they are wired up differently and they see things differently, or is it because things are different out in reality and it's made their consciousness different? There is no three-dimensional answer to this. I have been talking about such matters as this, about whatever can be said about reality is also true of consciousness. I've been talking about this on a pretty constant basis for the last several years. I've done it under several guises. With this weekly update, and for the next few weeks, I'm going to try and push you to a greater awareness that has real significance. I may have more than you'll guess for the next couple of weeks until it all comes together, if I get around to rebellion. The reality of this is what makes all of these parallels true. And by parallels, I mean such things as I bring out all these little inserts to the general map that I bring out every week, like a little insert in this growing map. It seems to be growing. If you're following all of this from week to week, it gets bigger and bigger, and then I seem to chew it up or fold it up and put it in somebody's pocket, and then we start somewhere else. But these little weekly updates are like little inserts that seems to push the map in some other direction off to the northeast for another inch or so, or to the southwest for another 2 to 7 degrees. But when I come up with such stories as asking you to consider that life could be run by these two unrecognized princes and that they are in collusion, and what seems to be some kind of gigantic struggle going on in life between good and evil, etc., etc., if there was such a conspiracy, if there was such unknown forces at work, I was asking you to consider the possibility that these two forces are actually very good friends, very well acquainted, and they keep up this kind of pressure. They keep up this kind of pretense that there is, if not an ongoing war at that minute, one just around the corner. Then, I ask you, after talking about it for 10 or 15 minutes or hours, then I say, can you see that this same situation exists internally, in you individually? Now, those of you that have a good memory, I'm not going to drag out more examples, but you know I do that constantly. The reason it works, even if you don't see any significance or see that it actually has a great parallel each and every time I do it, it does. Even if you don't particularly see it that week or that evening, it does work, and the reason it works is that whatever can be said by anybody, not just me, but everybody else doesn't see the connection. Nobody can see it with 3D consciousness. Nobody can see it with only two eyes. Nobody can see it dealing with two princes. But the reason it works, the reason that the parallels work, the reason that even parables work when there are, at least in fifth gear, and they were built by Italians, the reason they work then is this same thing, that whatever can be said, whatever can be noted, even by ordinary consciousness, as I said, it sees not the connection, and it really fulfills no extreme purpose in life. But anything that can be said about reality out there, anything, in the guise of sociological comment, psychological comment, religious observation, anything that can apparently be said about what's going on out in life, that same observation, whatever is said, is likewise true about consciousness, about the awareness of the human being. That is why all of this works. As many people have suspected, that is, they were wired up to make observations, to argue about it, try and defend it. It is absolutely true that reality and consciousness are one. And I do not mean in some allegorical way, although that's the only way you can put it, to 3D consciousness, to say that everybody, this is the most common that's been hanging around for thousands of years, that everyone invents their own reality. You can find that said 2,500 years ago in the Far East, and you can find it probably last week with the latest grapefruit grew in California, that somebody says that. And many people go, hey, that's heavy. Many people go, yes, that's true. 3D consciousness can go no further with it. And that is not the way that I would describe it, since it's already been retreaded so many times. But it is a fact that what is ordinarily called reality and what is ordinarily referred to and thought of as consciousness are one, but not metaphorically. They really are one, but it cannot be described. I could attempt, if I wanted to play with a certain kind of mathematics as I threatened to bring out, if you recall some months back I never had, I might get close to getting a few of you to see it, but it cannot be proven in the 3D world. We're lacking a dimension. But they are one, literally, molecularly. What I'm about to move into, there's several examples. There's sort of a bridge, if you can follow. This question that I say that this answers, that is there an objective reality, or is it everyone's subjective consciousness? And this has gone way off into orbit in the ordinary world, since it's not necessary for ordinary people to have any real food derived from these questions, but it flies off now into philosophical orbits, metaphysical, occult, etc. But the reality of this is in such matters as, let's take reality being partially perceivable, if one was interested, and almost everyone is interested nowadays in this part of the world, whether you think you are or not, in the events of reality being reported, news, information. With ordinary consciousness, when you hear the news, when you read the news in newspapers and news magazines, weeklies, the news appears to be disjointed. It's put into little columns in the newspaper. A story has a heading, and you read that story, and it apparently is about economics. And you turn the page, or you look at the bottom of the page, and there's one on politics. It may be in the same part of the world, but it's a separate story. And then there may be one about the health of the premier of a country very close to the one that was covered in the article regarding a political situation down here. So on page one, let us say, you may have a story about the economic conditions going on in Romania. Now on page 2, you may have something to do with the apparent political situation going on in Yugoslavia. 2 separate stories. Now on page 3, you may have one that has to do with the reputed, alleged ill health of the premier of Romania. But they appear to be disjointed stories. Now, I will hope in my little optimistic heart of hearts that all of you know by now that in some way all of that's connected. But it appears to ordinary consciousness to be disjointed. Stories come on the network news, on radio or television, and you turn it on, and they say our opening story is, and they talk about the economic situation in Bulgaria. And they go to a story, and they come back, and the guy says, and also today it was reported, and it's a new little packet. It's disjointed. In the same way, consciousness in ordinary people, as I've tried to get you to see on sundry occasions, operates in what appears to be a fragmented fashion. It's almost tied to the breath. That's not the point, but I've used that description before. People do not notice it, that you're simply conscious over here, and you're conscious over there. Then you're conscious of this. Ordinary people would say, well, you think about one thing, and then you think about something else. Or you're talking to somebody, and the subject changes. Or you're not talking to somebody. You're by yourself. You're walking down the street. You're driving your car, and you see something, and it makes you think about one thing. And you look over, and you see something else, and you think about something else. But it is not dissimilar, you should see. This is not metaphorical. It is not dissimilar to the separate news stories on television or in the newspaper, that you seem to think of one, then you think of another one. The newspapers put out daily. That gives the impression that yesterday's news is no longer valid. It's perishable. Now we need new news. Something new has happened, and here's another new packet. That seems to go on. And the question would be, if I could, for some reason, want to drag an ordinary person far enough, is back to what I started out tonight, is a person could ask the question as to which causes which. Is there a cause? Is there an effect? Is it the fragmentation of man's ordinary consciousness that makes him only look out upon life as witnessed, or the parallel situation being the news stories I just went through as an example? Is his fragmented consciousness such that when he looks around, he sees everything fragmented? He doesn't see any connection between the way he treats people at his place of employment and then the way that he treats his wife at home. He doesn't see any connection between the economic situation. This is, of course, getting very far afield from what ordinary consciousness will be capable of doing, but I've done it before. He would have no need, no interest, no ability to ever conceive of how the economic situation in Bulgaria might affect his job, much less then, finally, the way he treats his wife. But then you could say, all right, it is the disjointed way that life seems to operate in fits and starts. It's like that that makes us be conscious in that manner. So it's the world out there. It's the way things are. It's the structures of human institutions. It's the way nature flows that makes us think in little packets, that makes us be conscious in a fragmented fashion. We have no other choice. It would be wasteful to try to have some kind of continual flow of consciousness when all of life, as far as you can tell, witnessed by the newspaper, but all of life seems to just come in little quantums, little packets. It just happens. And then tomorrow something else happens, and yesterday's news is rotted. It's gone. Everyone that has a pencil and paper, I encourage you to take this as being strongly this week's update, at the very least this week's, is that. That's why I went to trouble to write it, that whatever can be said about, quote, reality, apparently out there, is also true, no conditions, it is also true of consciousness, any and everybody's consciousness, apparently in here. There's no way the ordinary consciousness can ever get a handle or find an end to these kind of questions as to the great cause and effect syndrome. Is what causes what? Now, I do not bring this up just to be mildly entertaining if it was that at all. All the kind of questions I just brought up, the one that people fall back on if they can't work in, it's just the tip of the iceberg. If they can't work that in, then they always fall back on, well, hey, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Are people unruly out in life because of social conditions, their own social conditions, or the social conditions such as they are because of unruly people? And the sociologist, the commentator, the news reporter says, well, who knows? If we could answer that, we could say which came first, the chicken or the egg. And consciousness, if it's paying any attention at all, can still deal with these kinds of truisms and cliches. It says, yeah, you're right, we've hit that point again, because who in the hell knows which came first, the chicken or the egg? You can't say. Consciousness can't picture, all right, the egg came first. Well, if you got an egg, you had to have a chicken. So wait a minute, all right, chicken came first. But if the chicken came first, it came from an egg. But here it is. Its ordinary consciousness cannot find a way out of this, literally. Not psychologically, literally. It is as mathematically true as the atomic tables. It is as mathematically true as chemical formulas. It cannot find a handle to this. It cannot find an end to the so-called cause and effect question. Because 3D consciousness, which remember that's what I'm referring to as ordinary consciousness, although, remind you one more time, I tried to bring some of this up to date and wrap it up a few weeks back. Although the yellow circuit deals in a binary fashion, ordinary humanity is in truth conscious in 3 dimensions. 3 dimensions as it's normally accepted of seeing into space, that you got height, breadth, and width, but also in 3 dimensions that whatever consciousness is beholding, that there is something going on, there is some kind of opposition to it, something resisting it, and then there's everything else. Except ordinary consciousness does not see any connection in anything else. To it, it is the plus in my equation. It's empty space. It is indeed E-force, irrelevant. It does not see that there is a continuum. It does not see that all these forces, that everything should actually be referred to as ad hoc forces. Because there's no such thing as a C force or a D force or an E force, because they replace each other. But here's the trickier part that I was trying to get you to. 3D consciousness cannot deal with this because it is dealing with what in truth amounts to a 4D loop system. Now I talk about a triaxial dance. That would be the best you could see in the horizontal world. That is the minimal that you have to see. You've got to have lateral consciousness, enough to see that going on. But you're still, remember, 1 degree short. You would still be always short 1 corner, 1 bit, 1 byte, 1 curlicue, because you have a 4D loop system going on that all energy is flowing through. But at this level, all you'll ever see is 3 dimensions. And so all questions about what causes what I'm trying to get you to see, I know it's hard, or you're not accustomed. But no matter how hard you grit your teeth, hold on, and try and think important thoughts, and even put on a false goatee and put on some thick glasses and try and look intelligent, and go, ordinary consciousness will never find out, can't even get close, can't begin to move with the question about which came first, the chicken or the egg. That is, which came first, cause or effect, or cause or effect, or cause or effector. And there's a reason. It's because this, let's take the question that seems to be the matter of cause and effect, chicken and the egg. There is a loop system going on, and it's running through 4 different areas. And the most ordinary consciousness can see is 3 of them. 1 of them is out of sight, is what I refer to, is what I had behind my descriptions of it being at a right angle. And so it is always, as far as ordinary consciousness, as 3D consciousness is concerned, it is an unsatisfying, that is unending loop. Is that all right? Which did come first, the chicken? No, it can't, because you had to have an egg to hatch a chicken. All right. But then you had to have a chicken to lay that egg. But then if you had that egg, you had to, and there you go. There is no end to it because you are short one bite. You are short one corner. You are short one leg. You are short, the technical term should be one curlicue. And 3D consciousness cannot project itself into it. And so there is never an answer. There is never an end to it. Now, part of the triumphant that I threatened to talk about, back to this great world of conspiracy theories. I'm getting a little short of patience with myself to keep having to make, or to keep making comments to you people seeing this on tape at other times and other places, to go into great detail about some of the examples I use. Is one reason I brought out tonight about whatever can be said about reality is also true about consciousness, if you can ever begin to see this. Conspiracy theories, I'm going to use the idea to start with as a springboard, as it seems to be out in ordinary life. That is reality out there. But there is something else in there. So I'm just reminding you one more time, I am not actually going to be talking about conspiracy theories, although I'm going to be talking about them. I'm going to use them as a fragmented reflection out there, and part of the reason, as I want you to see, is why. To try and realize yourself, why are they so popular? Is it because consciousness believes that they're out there, and then it projects it and it makes up? That everywhere it looks, it believes that there was a conspiracy that brought down the Roman Empire, that assassinated President Cleveland, if he was assassinated, that brought about the French Revolution? Or did these unexpected things happen in life, and it made, that is, there was a conspiracy going on, and it made consciousness go, wow, there must be a conspiracy. All right, here we go. First, I ask you again to recall, all of you should know, the wide gamut, conspiratorial theories, conspiratorial consciousness has been around as long as man has been recording his thoughts, which is as long as man has almost has had thoughts, that the yellow systems were in operation. Why? Now, ordinary consciousness would find, that is 3D consciousness, would be dealing with binary possibilities, and it immediately says, all right, there's one reason. It's obvious, you idiot. The reason they're popular is because they're true. Then you're back to, well, are they true because consciousness thinks they're true, or does consciousness believe they're true because they are true? And ordinary consciousness cannot answer that, so we will press on, being the flaming daredevils that we are, or that you are. There is a very specific, and I suggest to you again most strongly, the next few weeks some of you could really go somewhere with this, there is an internal and likewise apparently an external significance to the conspiratorial theories. Why are they widespread? Why, if you don't know this, whether it's recorded or not, I assure you that there's enough recording to catch your attention and if not take your breath away, that almost everything that's ever happened that was of enough horizontal and is ordinarily historical significance to make the history books to be remembered several hundred years later, somebody somewhere, some newspaper, somebody's consciousness that had a platform, had enough influence, had enough power to get other people's attention, said there was a conspiracy. Trust me. From Nero, he didn't just crack up. He didn't just have syphilis of the brain. He didn't just get drunk and burn down Rome. No. There was something behind that. It wasn't just him. The Dark Ages, you mean to tell me that all of Western Europe suddenly went, wow, it's hard trying to be intelligent and work ourselves up into higher intellectual beings. Why don't we take a few hundred years out and go back to squatting in the woods and beating up on each other? No, there was a conspiracy. The church was behind it. The church was trying to consolidate their power, that sort of thing. Do you think that the American Revolution just happened? You think it's all these people? They've just been over a few years from England, Germany, Scotland, France, Italy, that they're over here and just suddenly within a matter of months went, wow, boy, they're taxing us too much. Decide to, tell the king to go sit on it? No, there's much more than that. The Freemasons or whoever. All right, I'm just assuring you that just almost every apparently significant historical event, somebody has said there is a conspiracy behind it. That is, in other words, it is not simply as it appears to be. These conspiratorial theories cast a quite real shadow of 4D systems at work, and they have never been seen for what they are, and they offer a delightful, fairly large insert to the map that I've attempted to help you people draw. And I'm going into a few areas, a few aspects of the conspiratorial theory significance internally and externally. I may drag in some more in the next few weeks because I could go on and on. It is a beautiful map, but don't choke on just the external side. Don't just choke on whatever you may be wired up to believe might have actually been conspiratorial theories, because if you really believed, you back at your own smelly line level consciousness, if you actually believe that the Freemasons or the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or the banking community or somebody is in some conscious conspiracy in the world, if suddenly you think, aha, I'm fixing to admit it, and you always believed that even back when you were 15, woe unto you, prune brain. Because all you're doing is you're going back to one area of it. You're going back to the apparent reality of it. So you're going to have to learn how to dance either on 2 feet, 3 feet, or no feet on a tight wire. And I'm going into some aspects that make a beautiful paradigm, but you cannot take it as being simply an external comment or an internal one. It is not apparent reality and is not consciousness. It is both of those, then the third, and then the fourth that is outside the ordinary view, the ordinary understanding of 3D consciousness. I'm going to start out and sound as though we're talking about the external aspect. The ordinary consciousness is wired up to applaud an apparent abundance of ideas and opinions. And yet ordinary humanity does not need this. They do not need, and you can make it /want, because where I'm going to try and drag you for the next few weeks, and maybe even worse, need is the appearance of necessity. Need is what people, through ordinary consciousness, calls what life requires of them. And some people say, I need love a lot. And some people say, I need love a little bit. And some people say, I don't need love much at all. All that is showing, it is displaying different degrees across a wide spectrum that humanity is calling love, but is actually some chemical, some electrical, some molecular need of life itself. And people, it comes out need. That's why I stop there for a second and say, if you want to write any of this down, remember that is need/want. And once you begin to see if you can get outside the only being limited to 3 aspects of that 4D loop system, need and want merge, then they explode, then they disappear, and you've got rain coming back down in a stream, headed back toward the oceans, dreaming of what does tomorrow hold, and it forgot what yesterday held. So, ordinary consciousness is wired up to believe it needs an abundance of ideas and opinions, that it needs it, that it wants it, that it wants diversity in all areas. And that is just an impression of choice. Believe it or not, I have not changed the subject yet. Life offers the likeness of pluralism and yet it holds man in what amounts to a kind of singular vice. It is like a vice of limited awareness and information. True choices, whatever that may be. I underlined it, put quotation marks around it. The cheap trick and attempt of all the occult writers. I'm doing it for another reason. They believe they're doing it because it has special significance. I'm doing it because these words have no significance. But it's the closest we got. But whatever would be true choices, which I am telling you, and I've been suggesting a long time, and I've tried to bring enough of you up to the point that you won't get the terminal blues or fall into some binary, three-dimensional trap of feeling negative about what I'm skipping around on tonight and coming up. That the idea of choice or freedom is, what shall we say, a questionable impression placed upon man's consciousness. But if there were true choices, they would equal some kind of freedom. It is not necessary that man have choices. Now, and to more specifically what would apparently be the external aspect of these conspiratorial theories, conspiratorial consciousness. As man is surrounded by the impression of choices, of diversity. And let me go back to real hard copy external examples. There apparently are many sources of news, of reports on the external world, on the reports of not I. Here I sit in my house, I know what I'm doing. I'm sitting here having a beer and a pizza. You turn on the news, and they're reporting on what not I has done in the last 24 hours. Now, there apparently is diversity available. And let's first just talk about the United States, which is still the prime example of the way in which life has been moving. At least it's the prime example as would be seen in the three-dimensional aspect of the 4D loop. Apparently, and it's accepted by you, it's accepted by many other people throughout the world, that America is the freest place, it is the place with the most diversity, it is indeed a pluralistic society, to wit. You can sit there with the remote control of your TV at 6 or 7 o'clock, whenever it is on your city, and you can sit there and you can look at 3 different networks. Or if you've got cable, you can look at 4. In some cities, they've got a host of independent stations. There may be more, but there's at least 4 major networks, counting the cable. And you can sit there, and you can jump from one to the other. You can watch ABC. If you don't like what's going on, switch over to NBC, then CBS, then cable news. And there seems to be no doubt that there is diversity, and yet there's not. There is no diversity. They are all reporting the same fucking news. The same news. Now, surely all of you know that. You can be in a city that apparently has 2 newspapers. This is getting to be of less and less, well, this is literally getting to be in less and less validity because of the decreasing need for printed news. And as many of you know, some cities even apparently has a morning and evening paper. It's the same company. There are very few large cities anymore that even have two papers. But anyway, that's not really the point. But there apparently are two papers in many cities, at least. Then there's apparently, in the weekly format, there's Time, there's Newsweek, U.S. World Report. And apparently, there is diversity. There is a choice. Well, I don't like the way that Time slants the news. I cancel my subscription and I decide to subscribe to Newsweek. But they report the same stories, the same news. As I said, if you don't know it, those of you that don't have remote control, sit there and jump from all three networks every night. And other than what they call some little human interest story normally, which is of no consequence in supporting the status quo of human consciousness, the rest of the story is what was important, according to them, that they can put into 27 minutes. All around this world, the diverse number of people, the diverse number of political parties, social outlooks, all over this world, all three networks pick out the same stories. Conspiracy. Nah. You damn idiots. People that believe that. But it's got to be. The style, the presentation of the news from ABC to CBS, from Newsweek to U.S. News Report, the style and the presentation may change. The people reading the news on the network every night appear to be different types of people. But the news that gets reported, that is, now you're back, remember the question. If you were simple idiots, you'd say, all right, that's proof again, more proof of conspiracy. You're not even close yet. They report the same news, but the news is serving a purpose, and it's not serving the purpose of the Freemasons or the Rockefellers. It's serving somebody else. But what it does do, the news, what seems to be the diversity, we got an abundance of apparent sources, but you do not have an abundance or a pluralistic view of reality. It supports the immediate status quo. That is the reality that's reported. The style, as I started to say in the presentation, can apparently differ slightly from paper to paper, from network to network, but the essence of the content does not, and it is not recognized. Now, relatively speaking, there seems to be some awareness, because you can have someone, I'll do it again to you people, that I am not discussing politics, I'm just using external examples. But this is not political. If you think it is, you don't really belong here. Or if you think it is, and you feel like you belong here, stuff it away somewhere for a long time until you understand what I'm doing with this. Back to the examples I was going to use. Those who have been well-traveled, some of you, just from your own reading perhaps, would point out that compared to other tribes on this planet right now, that is, other areas of this planet, other areas of the body of life, we have more freedom here. That although apparently I could cast some doubt over the pluralistic news reporting of reality available to us, at least we got some. Whereas in some other poor country, like Romania or Russia, they got none. The so-called newspapers, radios, television are actually run by the government. So they don't even have the appearance. They don't have, even if we don't have as much. If I give you this, if I say, all right, we don't have as much, perhaps, diversity as I thought, since you pointed out, but at least we got more than they do. You're getting the same news reported, and consciousness takes an abundance of sources as being diversity. And it's not. If you go to another place that apparently the news organizations are run by the government, by the powerful, there's no pretense. You got one source. In Russia, you've got TASS News Agency, as far as the printed word. And everybody recognizes it. In the West, they say, tut, tut, tut. They got one source, and it's just spread all over the country. Whatever the government wants to say, they say it. But look at us. We got chains on by the Post family, by the Hearst family, and the Ryder Group, and Gannett Broadcasting. And so we got all these diverse opinions flowing in, so we can take it into account. We can formulate intellectual opinions. But they all report the same news. TASS reports the same news. Gannett Broadcasting reports the same news stories. The same news stories that go by the papers as the Washington Post syndication, as their several papers report. There is the appearance of diversity. But notice this. In certain areas of life's body right now, for instance, the United States, and it, of course, is nothing new here. We apparently had our country based upon the need for a pluralistic society. Now, there is reality to that I may not get into tonight, is what has made, if there was cause and effect, is what has made America the cutting edge. But this belief that this has been a pluralistic society is a limitation of your 3D consciousness. But let us say, from the viewpoint of someone in America, they would say, including you at line level consciousness will assume that you're a good American. He would say it is very important to have a diversity, an open market of opinions, information, discussion, because it leads to greater truth, it leads to greater freedom. And we cannot understand how much longer are the Romanian people, how much longer are the Russians going to put up with a one-party system, the press is controlled, and it's a known fact. Whatever the figure is, it's something like only 2 or 3% of the Russian population are members of the one party. That's just a known fact. It's not disputed by the Russians themselves, by those in power or out of power. It's not disputed by those observing it from the United States. And so there's still those that say, how can that poor 98% be misled, mistreated, all the way since 1917 up until today? It is a beautiful example of the obvious. Neither they nor you, that is, ordinary Americans, want a choice. Diversity is not needed. It is applauded here, but it is, if there was such a thing, it is an illusion. That is, it is only 3/4 of reality. Man does not need diversity to serve life's purpose, but certain areas, those in which life is going in a particular direction, must have the appearance of it. This is not as sticky as it may sound. It is the appearance of us having diversity here, if there was cause and effect, this simple, that has caused this society to be the leader in the external world. Technology, science, health, warfare, weaponry, the arts. It is that appearance. But it is an impression. It is not reality. And the truth of it is in you. You do not have to keep looking out here. The truth is in you. The partnership, the collusion between two princes inside of you does not want diversity. It does not need diversity. It does not need, nor can it use, conflicting opinions. That's why I kept suggesting to you that there might be a collusion going on. And yet inside your own partnership, it feels as though one of these has got to win. My good side's got to overcome the bad. My more progressive side has got to become my reticent side, my active side. The side that wants to get ahead has got to overcome my side of inertia and sloth, if people were still slothy. And it's not true. You got the laboratory right inside of you. And I've given you enough things to do that you should see that. People do not want choices. People are not wired up for it. And this is not any sort of psychological comment. This is a material comment. This is a molecular comment. And the reality is right inside of you. It's running up and down your nerve endings. You do not want a choice, not ordinarily. You do not want freedom. For certain, I repeat one more time, I'm talking fast now because I don't want you people to step somewhere and stand there and get stuck, because it's not really that tricky. Certain areas of life's body, that is, certain areas of this planet right now, and they are the least progressive. They're serving other purposes, but they do not have even the appearance, as we would call it, of diversity, of pluralism of views, political, social, economic. And nobody on this planet seems to have it comparable to us. The appearance of it, the need to applaud it, the need to believe that you have it, is serving a purpose. But you are living in 3D consciousness to believe that it occurs. That's why I stopped to go through these examples of the network, different papers. There is the appearance of diversity, of conflicting views, of a whole garden of possibilities that you could pluck out for your theories, your opinions, and you're blind. There is not conspiracy. We'll get to that. Just face up to the fact. It's just right before you. It's been all around you. There is no diversity, and you don't want it. If there was real diversity, you'd go nuts. This is somewhat parenthetical, right quick. At the ordinary level, there are people in mental hospitals that if they could describe it, and I know that they have in the past, but if you get them around a certain verbal core, they would describe the best they could that why they feel like they're coming apart is they don't know what to do because there seems to be so many choices in life. You do not want choices, you do not want diversity, and remember it should be want/need. It is not required by life. People are wired up, especially here. Now, people all over the world, even people in Russia, just so that you know that I'm not oblivious to this fact, there appears to be dissent in Russia, in Albania. There was dissent in Imperial Rome, Greece, everywhere. There's dissent here. You just don't recognize it in the same way. And dissent never has a strong enough voice to create real diversity. If it gets that strong, what you're going through is a real revolution, a real rebellion that life's, some part of life's body, that is reflected as some part of this planet, is fixing to undergo a dramatic change and go off in a slightly different direction. But up until that point that real rebellion, a drastic change does happen, diversity does not occur. It is not heard, it is not tolerated because it's not needed. But people are wired up to say, if only to themselves in certain areas, that is in certain countries right now, to say that they want diversity. But what they really want/need is the expected, the homogenized, and the controlled. The reality of that is in you. It's in your nerve endings right now. If your potential molecular structure is anywhere close to that I should be dealing with, then somewhere right now, later on tonight, before next week, the little synapses should jump into slightly different directions, and you'll be able to see that you do not want diversity, not the ordinary level. It would be disorienting. It would shake the foundations of your conception of reality, and it would shake the foundations of what seems to be your own consciousness. What you want is the expected. You turn on the news, and it's the same old shit. Remember my story that I told you, I didn't even make this one up, about the guy that going crazy for the newspaper on a charter boat. Finally found one hidden down under a seat cushion. I was reading it and telling his wife how glad he was that somebody left the paper, and she happened to look. It was over a year old. Up until then, he didn't know it. You want the expected. You need the expected. and to a growing degree, at least in the 3D world, what appears to be in the 3D world, is things to be homogenized. That's part of the purpose of the growing immediacy of the reporting of the news. That it gives more and more across this planet, more and more people, getting closer to everybody, the feeling that they are sharing any common reality. And you can only do that if there is an increasing immediacy of the reporting of out there. There is the need for it in an increasing manner to be homogenized, that there seems to be a shared reality between us and the Russians, between the Russians and the Bulgarians, between the Bulgarians and the Argentines, and it needs to be controlled. Again, I repeat, people are wired up to varying degrees, but let's just be somewhat simplistic and not completely out of the ball game by me saying everybody on this planet to some degree, all human consciousness says, believes, has some little spark somewhere that says what I need is freedom of choice. That's what I desire, is to have an abundance of diverse opinions available for me, information of conflicting opinions and views that I can choose from that will enrich me. I'd like to be pleasantly surprised. I would like to suddenly discover, like Sir Isaac did, great laws of the universe. And it's not true. You do not want the unexpected. You do not want that which is very foreign to you. And you certainly do not want to be exposed to that that seems to be out of control. And so, while you and everybody else, including some little man standing in Albania on the street corner, say either tacitly or out loud, the partnership says it somewhere, that, boy, I wish we had more freedom. Or conversely, or on the other hand, maybe, boy, am I glad I live here because we have so much freedom and such diversity. And I enjoy it. In fact, you can't have enough. I was delighted to hear that somebody may be starting a whole new network, and so I'd have my choice of at least 5 news shows every afternoon. Or I'm so glad I live in this particular area of life's body on this planet, that the arts are not controlled by the damned old government. Because I can go in places that we got museums here for modern art, we got museums that are only interested in representational art, we've got museums that are, in fact, dedicated to so-called radical wings of the art world. And boy, I'm glad to see that. But we can read anything we want to. But what's available? Let's say that there's no censorship whatsoever here in this part of life's body. People can print anything, including so-called pornography now. But now you got this question. What is there to read? You can say the poor Russians, the poor Albanians, the Albanian National Library, their Library of Congress only has 7 books. Or in China, the most populated country in the world, you can read anything in the world you want to as long as Mao wrote it. Now, that was true a few years back. But hey, look at us. You can walk in just your neighborhood library in some small town or city. And you walk in just a neighborhood and there are thousands, tens of thousands of books, a wide range. But now I assume all of you people have been in a library and looked around before. There appears to be an abundance of sources. But what's in those sources? The same old shit. It is a reflection of reality that is controlled, increasingly homogenized, and it's always expected. Conspiracy. You're still not any closer. I'll get there in a minute. Conspiracy. The presentation of reality from all sources, not just the news, I just use that as an obvious everyday example that seems to regenerate itself. Brand new news, brand new reporting. That, classical literature, from the Greeks, from the Middle Ages, contemporary. There seems to be diversity, that you can read what the Greeks thought about reality. You can read translations from the Arabic into what the Muslims made of reality. You can read translations from the Farsi insofar as what the erstwhile known as Persians thought of reality. Or you can dig up Chaucer and try and read, at least in a apparently novelized form, what was the conception of reality to groups of people back in the early Middle Ages. And taking into account different times and different places, you still have that which is expected, going back 2,000 years ago to another part of the world. You do not pick up a book of translation from the early Greek thinkers, from the Indian philosophers. Sure, it appears to be verbally different than the Christian conception of religion if you were looking back at translations from the Bhagavad Gita or somewhere. But there is nothing that is not expected anymore, and it seems more and more, in ordinary conscience, it could take credit for it and say, well, we're becoming more sophisticated. But it apparently is less and less, put it that way, foreign. That the ideas inherent in the Hindu religion, as it's sometimes called, is not actually as far removed from Christianity as my grandmother would have it. Plus, it seems to be controlled. You do not pick up a book, even if it said a book on strange non-Christian religions, for instance, or a book describing non-democratic governments in the world. You thought, boy, I want to get something different. And you check it out and you go home and you open it, and you open up the book. Now the book goes, ah! You know, that some form, some energy, like demons, the unexpected, the uncontrolled, suddenly leaps out of these pages. Goes, ah, and scares the hell out of you. They can say a book on the absolutely unexpected, and it is not true. You know it's not true. If you'd like to see that I always do take into account all reality, you can get over in whatever it is, about the 100 or 120 section in the Dewey Decimal boat, and find these books on me and my family was taken aboard a UFO. And me and my family was taken aboard a UFO explained. And me and my family was taken aboard a UFO part 2. And you can say, well, wait a minute, that's unexpected. No, it ain't. Plus, that is not a part of the general reality. Even if you're a part of the small number that might say, hey, this is true, and there's a conspiracy to keep us from knowing about it. Those are the kind of books that would be more, that kind of description of reality would be more likely to be available in a area of life's body that apparently was not as open to diversity as here, because it's not going to affect anything. It is no more than the networks reporting the same news right into the last few minutes of their show and say, here's an interesting story about a little boy who lost his cat down out in Wichita and how he found it. You flip over to another channel and say, here's an interesting story about 2 little children up in Great Falls, Montana that built the world's largest snowman. It's irrelevant. It's neither pro or con the status quo of reality. It's conveying no information necessary to the conspiracy that I'm fixing to get into when we turn the tape over. On your mark, turn. I'm going to move into another part related to conspiratorial consciousness before I really get into what, if we had freeloaders watching this, what they really want to hear is me say something about the actual conspiracy and get down to it. Name names, give out addresses. All right, we're going to have to talk now, or I'm going to. If I can do that cliche that now we've got to. All right, that's just the tip of the chicken. I'll draw upon everyday terminology. I'm going to tell you that there is something of great significance tied into this. That's in fact one part of what I plan to deal with the next few weeks, and that is power. And it has to do with this apparent division. And again, trusting that all of you have gotten up to the point that no one will get the blues too fast. That everything on this planet, everything in the horizontal world, as I've been calling it. You remember my older symbol of my cross of what appeared to be, as I used to call it, the horizontal world, and divided up by a kind of vertical world. That horizontal world, from one viewpoint, appears to be the world of external reality. And the vertical line would apparently be, from one view, consciousness of the line. You should be able to see that what I used to call, when I referred to it more often, the horizontal world is actually the 3D world. But this, of course, doesn't do it, drawing it on paper, because this one line should be going in 3 dimensions, and then the vertical line should actually be going at a right angle to those 3 dimensions, which is what all of this is about, which is the only way that you can see the kinds of things I'm talking about. Now, we've got to talk about, appears to be 2 distinct camps. And you're just going to have to face up to it. I'm going to put it out to you. That on this planet, us humans, inside of an entirely living system that I call life in the body of life, that is all alive, and that we are here for a purpose that can be seen if you get outside of 3-dimensional consciousness. That humanity is divided up into the powerful and the powerless. And all of you, all of us, fit into the latter category. In the horizontal world, that is the 3-dimensional world, I could call it other things, and the powerless. And all of you, all of us, fit into the latter category. In the horizontal world, that is the 3-dimensional world. I could call it other things. You just can keep some of these in mind until you find out, so that you won't choke on just a term or a description. But you could look at it as being the prosperous and the deprived. You could look at it as being labor and management. You could look at it as being the controlled and the controllers. Or you might find some connection between the dominant and the submissive. But while I'm speaking about the 2 aspects and the significance of conspiratorial awareness, I am going to use the terms the powerful and the powerless. Now listen, I'm going to go fast, and it sounds as though I'm talking about the external world, and what I'm going to say is not secrets. Of course, there's going to be further proof that there is some kind of goddamn conspiracy going on, right? But now, this is only one aspect I'm starting out. I'm talking about apparently out there. When you've got to keep in mind simultaneously, if you had 4D consciousness, whatever can be said of reality is also true of consciousness. All right, we're starting out apparently, I am. Right now, I'm going to be talking about apparently out there, that reality. On that level, there is indeed the horizontal, powerful, and it has absolute hereditary aspects. I guess I better keep talking fast. Don't stop yet. Don't believe you've stepped somewhere. But look, here we are in a certain part of life's body, on a certain place on this planet, being Americans, being those most attuned to freedom, diversity, the need for it, the love for it, those that applaud it, those who say they would die for it, those who believe in so-called democracy. or the Republican type of government. Freedom for all of us. Equal opportunities. Free to pick and choose what we believe. In fact, fought directly. Our initial rebellion was against a damn monarchy. People that believed that the gods in some way picked out this family. And once the old man died, his son got the mantle. You're missing something. There is a need for a monarchy. It is inside your molecules. It goes by different names. And what I am telling you first off, and apparently out here, there is a material, hereditary, molecular basis for it in life's own DNA. How can you explain, and you can't do it 3D, how can you explain in parts of the world very close to us in the development within life's system? Western Europe, England. Look at the love they have of the monarchy, which theoretically, or not theoretically, which practically speaking, is all but impotent. Now they can say, well, it's some kind of ritual, we're used to it, they can say anything they want to, observers can, those involved with it. Look at their popularity. The taxes that are paid to keep up this impotent, useless monarchy. If that's not strong enough for you, read gossip columns. If you can't go out there yourself, and it's easier to read them. Every pretender to every throne in Europe, Western and Eastern Europe, are small-time celebrities. Pretenders to the thrones of Belgium, Romania, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which no longer exists. But there are people who have been identified. Read the gossip columns in the Paris Express, and they're talking about who was at such and such club last night, and they'll start listing. Prince Leopold the 14th, pretender to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and there he is all dressed up. They treat him, he walks in, they treat him like a royalty because he is the pretender to the throne, and the damn place doesn't exist. Don't laugh too quick. They're still treated like somebody. The powerful serve a need. Now we're talking about the horizontal world, remember. But you got to face up to this. You got to see it. It's no cause for alarm, and it's not negative. But especially, the consciousness of this part of the world rebels against that. It seems to be the anathema of diversity, pluralism, democracy, individual freedom. And you're wrong. Your molecules desire a monarchy. You desire an identifiable seat of the powerful. I want to try and jog some of you into being able to turn around and look at this, because it will change. It has the potential to really change. Of course, real change is not something that you will be singing about 2 months from now. It happens. That there is a brotherhood you can feel. That all of you, to varying degrees, have a feeling of superiority. If you don't like that, all of you have, at ordinary level of consciousness, you have a feeling of isolation, I plus not I, that it's me and it's these other fuckers here on this planet. Some of them, not too bad. Most of them I could do without. If you begin to see, if you can see, that I am telling you that the world is divided, the horizontal world is divided into the powerful and the powerless, then you, every one of you hearing me that I know of right now, here and in other cities, you can immediately begin to feel a brotherhood with at least 93% of every sucker on this planet. Any time that you're rolling down the street and you see a couple of guys out digging ditches, and it looks like they're real crude and uneducated, and someone goes by and they holler, "Hey, mama, come grab this," or "Look at me." think, my. And there's a feeling of superiority. When you begin to see that 93% of everybody on this planet is powerless in the 3D world, and it is a literal fact, it is a molecular fact. Conspiracy, wait a minute, we'll get to that. Once you see that, you got to see that you are just, horizontally speaking, you are just as powerless as the most uneducated person on this planet, the poorest person in this country. You are as helpless, you are as powerless in the 3D world as some man or woman who is illiterate, who's never had a philosophical thought, who's on welfare, who's out begging some wino on the street. They are part of a brotherhood, I'm telling you, is at least 93% of people on this planet. You are all in that division of being powerless. They're parts of life's own DNA structure. And it is operated, as it always has, in a hereditary fashion, which I am telling you, or suggesting if you want it that way. It's where this idea of a God-appointed monarchy in certain areas came from, that it passes along. That is a reflection of something. I feel like I must do it again. I am not talking about that same apparent Mickey Mouse world that ordinary people think I am. I'm not talking about that there is something to do, secret or something of extreme importance have to do with the House of Windsor that's really going on and we don't know any more about. Or the Leopolds the 1st through the 14th are actually plotting something to bring back the Austro-Hungarian Empire, if not burlesque. No. Not yet. We hadn't got there yet. Human life on this planet is divided into the powerful and the powerless, and you cannot move. You can become rich, but if you start out as part of the powerless, there's no way you'll ever become powerful. An ordinary consciousness, working with a 3D part of the loop, can believe, which I suggest to you again, I point you back to the impression that there is freedom, the impression that there is pluralistic opportunities. Now, would you not, at line level consciousness, believe that you could gain power if I said, all right, tomorrow you're going to win a lottery, let's assume, you win $5 million. Let's make it $10 million today. That would certainly change you from being a carpenter, a bricklayer, a cab driver, a waitress. Not what I'm talking about. You will never be powerful unless you were born there. No amount of money will make you powerful. You will be part of the powerless. But notice the general belief, and if you were asked point blank, you an ordinary consciousness of everybody else, you said, you're pretty, if the world's divided into the haves and the have-nots, and there you are, you're a little waitress or a short order cook, you'd be one of the have-nots. And the person would say, yeah. So what if you won $10 million tomorrow? Would that change? You say, you betcha. I would no longer be a damn loser. I'd be a winner. I'd be part of the haves. I'd be part of the powerful. There is that belief. Just feel it. It's in your own molecules that, yeah. And it is not so. I could further suggest to you real quick that things are arranged, apparently, out there in the world, that some professions, some occupations, seem to give some kind of ephemeral or passing illusion of power. Why else would somebody become a cop? If you were looking at it from some three-dimensional, even intellectual view, why would somebody go for that amount of money, run the risk of being shot? Almost everybody looks at you like, you know, sit on it. Why would somebody do that? You got the illusion of some kind of power over people who seem to be even less powerful than you are. Or as a cop I met one time, in his cups, he finally admitted, somebody asked him, why are you a cop? And he said, because I can push people around. The man told the truth. Or some of the professions. People believe, you hear all the time, this is a story especially in America. It's not just limited here, but still this is the prime example on one end of a three-dimensional spectrum, that people say, I came from a poor background, I was the first person in my family to ever go to college, but by God I worked, I did this and I did that, so I could become an attorney, so I become a doctor. Why? From one viewpoint. And remember, from one viewpoint. It's the appearance, the impression that I'm gaining power. Not only will I make money compared to what I read the statistics for lawyers, doctors, dentists, but I got a certain amount of power. I got more power in my community if I'm a doctor than if I'm a cab driver. Not the kind I'm talking about. A doctor got no more power than a cab driver. Not in this division I'm telling you exists and always has exist, and you are in it and don't see it. There's the powerful and there's the powerless, the 93% club, in which we're all brothers. Being a doctor won't change it. Winning $10 million won't change it. Why do people, from another view, this is just one view, remember, just one aspect, why do people want to become famous? If I could just write a book that'd sell 1 million copies, get on the bestseller list, and I'd be on all the talk shows. Not just the money, but there's the sense that celebrities have power. They got no more power than a cab driver. The powerful may give them some sort of temporary platform to speak out against drunk driving, try and collect money for brain damage, try and sell some products. Celebrities got no power. Being rich, being famous will not give you power. If you're not part of the powerful, you cannot move there. But to varying degrees throughout life's body, to varying degrees, starting from almost none to, let us say, our impression here in this part of the world, that there is the freedom to move about, that the powerless can become powerful. Thank God I live here and not in Russia, because anybody here can grow up to be president. And you keep waiting this time of year for the Easter Bunny to show up? Do you believe that God loves you? By the way, being president is not necessarily, by any means, a powerful position. Or if you want it point blank, what if I told you that there's never been anybody president of this country who was part of the powerful, that they've all been in the same club as you? If any of you doubt that, look at the surviving presidents. They're almost like dazed little chipmunks and mice. That, as it's oftentimes called, and it's an accepted fact throughout the horizontal world, that they will verbalize that the President of the United States is the most powerful one man in the world. Now we've got, how many now? 3 living ex-presidents. I assume they all still got some kind of secret service people still around that we're paying for. But they might as well be a man or a woman who was the hottest movie star, the hottest rock group 2 years ago, and now they couldn't get a job as a bar band down the street. An ex-president now can show up somewhere, and they may trot out an assistant. You know, in Romania, they may send out an assistant undersecretary of hog slop, and he may come out the airport and say, you know, hello, hello, and that's about it. There's not even the illusion now that he has any power. Now, how can that be? He was so powerful before. Or this celebrity could walk into Vegas, walk almost anywhere in the world. He is so hot, she is so hot, she walks into a restaurant. It doesn't matter. Not that the maitre d' says we're full. They're actually full. But here she walks in, they go over to somebody and say, get the fuck up and get out of here. They give them the table. A year later, 6 months later, they've had 3 bombs in a row, 2 LPs that were turkeys. Where's the power? There is none. But there is the impression. And there's the impression in other people that if I could only be elected president, if I could only be elected governor, mayor, if I could only get out a hit album. It's not just the money. I want to be rich and famous. And sometimes people out in the ordinary world Life misspeaks, and it talks about being rich, famous, and powerful. No. Went too far. So normally it's just left at, boy, I wish I was rich and famous. That is possible. At least the illusion, the impression that that's possible is there. And it happens just often enough. The news is presented, that is, reality seems to present itself to the general consciousness of some area in such a way that you believe that it is possible. I just read about, it was a woman 50 years old, never written a word in her life, and she sat down at the kitchen table in longhand and started writing this book 6 months ago, put it over the transom in an agent's office in New York. The person accidentally read it, accidentally handed it to somebody at Random House. They accidentally went, wow, and now it's #1 on the New York Times. She's on all the talk shows. She's already sold the movie rights for $3 million. She's rich, she's famous. I could do it. But then there's also the feeling that that would give me a sense of power, or I would be powerful. I would be famous. People would treat me in a different way, that's power. And I would be rich, because there's no doubt money is power. What is newsworthy? The human interest story at the tail end of the network news, way back on page 197 in the newspaper. A story about a little old lady out in Nebraska that successfully fights against the state coming in, condemning a part of her old farm to put in a new highway. She doesn't really even have enough money for an attorney. Some people hear about it. Some attorneys devote their time. They give it to her pro bono. They fight it in the courts. Goes through the local level, and then it gets appealed. And the court somewhere, justice, our judicial system, stops that highway from taking that poor little lady's land. It's a newsworthy story. But here's where 3D consciousness breaks down. Here's where you don't see the obvious, where ordinary consciousness can't. It's newsworthy for one reason. It's a fucking exception. What you don't hear about is 99% of the time, if the state wants your land, it gets it. I'm not talking about politics. I'm not talking about government. Well, wait a minute. That's surely a conspiracy. We'll get there in a minute. 99% of the time, it seems to be the powerful against the powerless. 99% of the time, at the very least, and I'm being magnanimous, the powerful win, and you don't hear a whimper. The only reason it's newsworthy is because it is such a goddamned exception. But ordinary consciousness is not wired up to be aware of that. It is that same kind of illusion that makes the newspapers, the electronic media, report the activities of celebrities, to report the person, the out-of-work mechanic that wins $10 million in the New York lottery, that shows that in the city council of Earwax, Montana, an illiterate little woman who had her land taken away by the highway department 3 years ago, got mad as hell, no experience, 84 years old, hard of hearing, ran for the city council of Earwax and got elected. That will make the human interest story on one of the networks. Why? It does not affect the status quo. It's irrelevant. It's meaningless. But it helps continue the illusion that there is a plurality going on, that there is a freedom of choice, that there is just, well, look at it. Look at that story. There is the possibility of almost anything happening. I'll be damned. And it's not. If there was, that would not be a newsworthy story. It's just as obvious as hell once you see it. Well, if you can get past 3D. The only reason it's newsworthy is because it's newsworthy. But consciousness accepts it without any analysis, of course, as proof that this is the norm. If that was the norm, it wouldn't be reported. It would not be apparently a part of meaningful reality out there. They do not break into a network news program to say, in your general area right now, we have just found out, we have ascertained that it is a normal drizzle of rain which is neither increased nor decreased our average expected rainfall in this area, and so none of you should be alarmed. We're just reporting it. In other words, we interrupt this program to tell you everything's fine, everything's going. And yet what appears to be these exceptional stories of a little old man who grew up impoverished as a farmer and later became president, a man who was so poor that he had to help his father build the log cabin he was born in. He was so poor that man finally became president. If that was true, which is not, if that was true, the reason that the story seems to be newsworthy is because it would be newsworthy, because that is not what happens. And yet 3D consciousness just swims on through this swamp, swims on through dealing with 3 parts of a 4D loop system, and believing that things stand for one thing when Kai Root said 10 years ago that perchance, at least in the 3D world, things may be upside down. That the very things that seem to be proof of one thing, that is, the little old lady beat City Hall, there's proof of our freedom. There's proof that almost anything can happen. Contraire. Of course, you can say contraire in the 3D world because there's always apparently the opposite. And the opposite is true. The only reason this story is newsworthy is because this story is newsworthy. That way over 99% of the time that this situation arises, you never hear about it. And the powerless is proved again to be powerless. That is, perchance the conspiracies continue to run a course, right? All right. If you're not against something, you can't be for anything. Now, that's just, out in the 3D world, that's just as true as grits are delicious. That's just as true as it can be. That's so true that could be the title for next week's Baptist sermon. It is functionally correct in the 3D world. Think about it just for a second. There is no way that consciousness can express, either to itself or externally, what it is for in any field that you could name. Political, economic, religious, philosophical, personal behavior. Unless you can express, unless there seems to be something that you are against, there's no way you can be for anything. Come on, folks. You got your own little brains. I've been trying to make you look at them now for a long time. There is no way that ordinary consciousness can be for anything unless it's against something. It simply cannot. You cannot have any religion unless it's against the evil forces. You can't have a political party unless it's against the other political party, unless it's against chaos, unless it's against unprofitable dissent of any kind if it's a one-party system. You cannot be for, I don't know, I guess my favorite school of painting would be the post-expressionist. Because I'll tell you one thing, I cannot stand what is now referred to as the expressionist school. Give me a break. You got to be against it. Now back to the powerful and the powerless. You can see this reflected in a particular way with them. Well, you cannot see it through ordinary eyes, and you cannot see it three-dimensionally. The powerless, that is all of you hearing this, and there's every chance in the world, if there's people hearing this 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're still going to be part of that. The great brotherhood of the powerless in the horizontal world. Since I repeat that several times, some of you off on your own might consider, why is it that the powerful never end up in this? Some of you real fast might even go further. Has it so many of the powerless in so-called religions and philosophies and theologies and metaphysics? What would they prefer more than anything in the world, even an enlightening experience? That'd be to have somebody powerful come see them. For Oral Roberts, the Pope, on direct speaking terms with God, what'd be more fun than God showing up if he could, if there really was a God, they think? What'd be more fun? Ooh, I don't know, what if Greta Garbo would come see me personally? What if Reagan would stop by on one of my telecasts and say that he watches my religious program? What if Frank Sinatra would say, maybe just let me quote him, that he's read my book on my theory about the flying saucers and has connected with McDonald's? If he just said how much he enjoyed the book, God, I'd be on the way to being rich and famous myself. Anyway, back to what I was going to say. The powerless feel like that they're against the powerful. The powerful feel like they're against becoming powerless. Or if you want another way, instead of calling it the powerful and the powerless, let's call it winners and losers. That's a good quick one for you. The losers, the 98% brotherhood, the 93% brotherhood, feel as though they are against the winners, as the have-nots feel as though they're against the haves. But then the winners, the powerful, they feel as though they're not against the powerless, the losers. What they're against is becoming a loser. What they're against is losing their power. What they're against is becoming part of the powerless. I'm going to save some of the more details, I think, for next week so I can have a verbal segue from this into some of next week about how these apparent conspiratorial theories are claimed to exist and how they apparently are running things along similar lines I've been discussing. A good conspiratorial believer could hear this, assuming that they were wired up enough to ignore the many tire bumps and what I've said. They could go, yeah, boy, you're right on it. Everything you described I thought about before. Or if I hadn't thought about it exactly that way, you're right. There's a goddamn conspiracy going on, and I am powerless. Somebody's in charge here. There is some kind of willful conspiracy going on, and boy, you're right on it. There are other aspects that I'm going to talk about. And either next week or sometime shortly after, I'm going to go into the third area of rebellion. But let me at least point out to you that all of this conspiratorial awareness, conspiratorial theories, forget about a secret group. Forget this 7% that I'm saying you at least would fall into in the 3D world, and they're born into it. But don't stop and think, wait a minute, that's humans being born into something. It's now molecules being produced in life's own DNA. And they're of a different type than the 93%. This 7% is not some group of bankers, mystics, religious people. Talking about life. Every example, everything I have touched on, everything I haven't touched on, every belief, every suspicion, every conviction that people have that there is a conspiracy going on, whether that person thinks I can identify the people, or I've heard them identified and I agree with it, they've looked everywhere but the right place. They are a part of the conspiracy. As I said, my general plan, I was going to use some more examples of how the conspiratorial theories are assumed to exist, how they perpetuate themselves, how they blind the powerless, those being conspired against, how they manipulate them, how they abuse them, and it all fits, by God, it all fits, except for this. There is no mortal, willful conspiracy going on. It's life. And nobody can see it. And when I get to rebellion, and I'll go ahead and point this out to you, it's tied in, if you can't see the connection right now or not. There can be no lasting peace in the land of the living. Never. And yet, it is all wired up to believe that peace is to be preferred. Peace is right around the corner, or conversely, peace is a long way off, and so we must work harder for it. But in the land of the living, there is no peace. And unless you understand a certain kind of rebellion, unless you understand that you are fighting, if there was such a thing, illusionary foes, to believe that it's you or your group against the powerful, that you are in some way shut out, that you are indeed, as I described it tonight, part of the powerless, and you have got to knock down the doors in some way, through luck, through skill, through talent, through armed revolt, through appealing. You've got to join up and be powerful. It's too late. If you weren't born there, you're not going to get there. And you've got to understand that things can go in another direction. But there is a great liberation. Trust me. If you can begin to see, just quite simply, I'm not talking about spending years, much less, days or hours, that you're part of a 93% brotherhood out in the 3D world. There's just nothing else to say. There's nowhere to look. There's no dream that, well, I don't really think that I am intrinsically better than some poor old ditch digger. Yeah, you do. You may believe that you are so civil, liberal, that you would not believe that, especially a man or woman like you with a PhD in philosophy. But you're obviously better than this other person who only has a master's in philosophy. The belief that you are in some way, everybody, you're wired up this way, it's not psychological, that I am better than some people. I am smarter. I am more astute. I am more conscious. There is a great division that you are in, you were born in it, you cannot escape from it, and that is the powerful and the powerless in the 3D world. And all of you are in the latter category. 93% of humanity at any given time, the minimum, is in that same category. And once you can feel that, a lot of your dreams that you're supposed to have, that is a lot of the feelings of needs, of wants, the idea that there are diversity of choices and opportunities is not true, not in the 3D world. And you are never going to become powerful. Never. Nothing can ever happen. It would be the same thing, as far as words go, of a liver cell becoming a brain cell. It will not happen. It cannot happen. And yet if, from a 3D view, if we were to say, well, a brain cell is obviously superior to a liver cell, or if I had to be one or the other, I'd want to be a brain cell, then there's got to be the belief that it's possible to go from being a liver cell to a brain cell, but you have got to see that it's not possible, and that you don't really want it. It would be unexpected. You could not stand it. You would give a whole new definition to that good old 60 terms of my mind was blown. Every gasket in you would be blown. You do not want a choice. You do not want freedom, whatever that may be. You do not want diversity. The proof is all around you. You do not go places that has diversity of opinion. It's very hard to find. And what would apparently be a place that has some diversity of opinion is of no consequence. Conspiracy. You can say, well, I grew up in a Orthodox Jewish religion and culture, and I feel the need to expand my intellectual and cultural wings. I'll go over and I'll visit with the Catholics. God, is that far removed? It's just foreign to me. No, it's not. They wear different hats. They go to church on different days. They eat different foods on different days. But you go there and sit down, assuming they're speaking in English. Nothing unexpected. Nothing out of control. You don't go in and sit down, and suddenly these little children come out with candles or whatever it is, and then this guy comes out in a suit and clothes, and you're sitting there and you've never seen it, and suddenly the priest turns to the audience and goes, "Ah!" Nothing of the like. If you say, my daddy was a Democrat, my grandfather was a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat, I want to do something new. I'm going over and visit the young Republicans. I see at their meeting over at the Holiday Inn. Go over there and what's going to happen? It's not diversity. There are those that are in apparent positions of power horizontally, and there are those who want to get in power. And here they're called Democrats and Republicans. Somewhere else they're called Social Democrats and the Working Party. Other places they're called Whigs and Tories. Other places they're called the Party and dissenters. They're simply those apparently in horizontal power politically. I'm not speaking now about my general category of powerful and powerless. But all of this, it seems to be diversity of opinion, or the new Turks in art or music, saying there's a great deal of difference between us and our father's generation, the painters that went before us. We got to kick over all the traces. We got to come up with new literature. The closest they can come to apparently doing something different would be if they say, all right, we are tired of the old literature. It doesn't reflect reality. It doesn't serve the social needs. It doesn't serve the psychological needs of us, the new generation. So then they decide, all right, here's new literature. And a group of them get together, or one guy or one woman seems to be the forefront, the avant-garde of it, and they write an entire book backwards. And you can say, hey, that's different. That's as different as Norman Mailer and Roth and everybody else. This is indeed a new generation, but it is so far removed, it's irrelevant. It's the same thing as the little old lady that got the road stopped, the little old lady that got elected to the city council of Earwax, Montana. It's meaningless. The only reason that it would be newsworthy is it's of no consequence. It either is newsworthy because it's newsworthy, or somebody says, hey, there's a book here, and the guy wrote it backwards. And everybody looks at it and goes, wow, is that way out? End of story. It's yesterday's news. It was newsworthy because, or it was news acceptable, I should say, to keep you from getting confused. It was news acceptable. It could make the little filler space in the newspaper. It could get in for 10 or 15 seconds on the nightly news for one reason. It's irrelevant. Here's an interesting story about a man who swallowed 20 packs of razor blades and sneezed, and they came out his ears, and he's fine. And he smiles in the camera. And they say, good night until tomorrow. And you think, what the hell does that mean? It meant nothing. It is a matter of power, conspiracy, and rebellion. But you need to see in the most straightforward way, without listening to any of your own partnership talk about politics, economics, or believe that I'm talking about anything in any way that I'm referring to with any significance to the world out there, to things as they appear. I'm just having to talk about such things as this and use examples because there is a parallel. Because it is not all illusionary, it's just incomplete. But there is a direct parallel, is what that first one means, is whatever can be said about reality is also true about consciousness. It's why does it appear to be so that there is some kind of conspiracy afoot? Why does it appear to be so when I say that the world's divided into the powerful and the powerless? You know, you can win $1 million, you can get to be famous, and you're never going to join the powerful, never. And suddenly somewhere, as they say, in your heart of hearts, you realize, yeah, it is true. That's true. Now that you say it, it is true. And then rebellion, which I didn't really touch on. But the reality is in you, and it is not seen. It is not seen that there is a, to say the very least, a paucity of diverse opinions, even though you applaud them, even though everybody in the world, everybody in the last body to varying degrees believes that they would be better off if they had them. Diversity, pluralism does not exist on this planet. It does not exist in the body of life where we are. The closest thing to any pluralism is this kind of shit. But where is it going? Because what are we against? Task. One task and one continuing task. The task, I want you to neuralize if indeed I/we, I drug you into it, made you be part of it, if we were to turn this apparently into some public system, something to present as an organized something or other, whether we present it on the basis of it's a religion, it's a political idea, it's a political party, it's an economic theory, whatever. Something that we go out to here is a cohesive, organized theory, philosophy. What? Now forget the sham shell of it, based upon what you understand up till now. What could we say that this is against? Now I mean this seriously. I want you to really, knowing put pen to paper until at least 6.5 days from tonight. But then if something hits you that's worthwhile, is handed in to me or collect them out in the other cities or mail them to me individually. What could we say that this is against? Keep in mind, verbally I told you something that from one viewpoint is true. That if you're not against something, you cannot be for anything. So first you've got to make known what you're against. A continuing task doesn't sound right. What would it be? Duty? Continuing something I want you to do. If at all humanly possible, I want all of you to do it on the morning of the day that you meet to see these tapes. If for some reason that's not humanly possible, I'd prefer you do it on your off day. I'm assuming most of you are off on Sunday. I'd like you to do it on Sunday. And here's what I want you to do. either on the day that you meet to see these tapes or that we meet here, I want you to get up earlier in the morning on that day so that you've got at least an hour extra time. So that means don't get up an hour early and put on coffee and fiddle around and then only have 30 minutes left. Get up early enough so that you've got an hour of free time more than you would normally have. An hour net getting up early. And on that morning, what I want you to do is to have you a collection of books set aside for this continuing task. And I want the books to be undergraduate books such as, it's not limited to, but this will about cover it, logic, physics, sociology, chemistry, biology. You don't have to be all of these. These kind of books from the courses, I forget exactly what they used to call them. It's like analyzation of literature, historical analyzation. But if they've changed the terms since I was there, around it, since I was there. Since I passed a college once, college bookstore, just a history book then, or just a survey of American lit. Of course, the best way, I'd suggest those of you who are not on the list, get on the list or right off to, up in New York, places like Barnes and Noble, or Publisher Central, or Hamilton Books, and they normally have a section of last year's or 3-year-old textbooks that were published at $25 you can pick up for $3.98. But have you those kind of books, just the basic like 101 chemistry, and have them set aside somewhere, and on that hour get up and pick up one and start reading from the front. If it doesn't strike you, lay it down. If you start off with chemistry, lay it down. If something doesn't strike you, and start reading English lit. If that doesn't strike you, lay it down and move on to physics. But for that hour, I want you, within that kind of framework of the books I mentioned, have them there. You can get them time, fix your coffee, do whatever, splash your face, sit on a good, comfortable chair, but spend an hour reading somewhere within that kind of framework from those kind of 101 books, college-level freshman books.